I literally came into this review defending this guy, and then finally, upon pulling this guy out of the box and standing him right next to Symbiote Suit Spidey, God. What you're about to witness is probably one of the most transformative and existential reviews I've ever done on this channel. And trust me, you're going to want to probably stay until the very end to see exactly how I end versus how I started with Black Suit Spidey here. Here we are on the cusp of about 2 years since the release of the game, and we're just barely delivering on the black-suited symbiote Spider-Man / Peter Parker. And frankly, I'm pretty happy that at least it's better late than never, right? And I'm even happier to note that for the majority of what I'm kind of tasting here, it would have to be that maybe we are dealing with an amalgamation of different body sculpts that at least does, if that is the case, doing a pretty good job of kind of disguising, kind of like the symbiote suit does to Peter's persona. It's sort of masking a little bit of prior existing molds that I've seen before and trying to convey almost a whole new body for the symbiote suit version of the black suit from Spider-Man 2. I've seen some people kind of skate this guy online to the point of even going a little hyperbolic in saying that it's like one of the worst things ever released from Hasbro recently. This thing's atrocious. It's a complete missed opportunity. And don't get me wrong, it definitely has its problems. It definitely has factors or spaces of missed opportunity and other things where I think to myself, why exactly they kind of decided to opt out for that choice. But overall, I would say that this is probably a really well thought out representation of the black suit, especially in the moments and in the places, to at least be faithful to the representation that Insomniac brought about in their take on the character, or take on this whole arc that is, like I said, one of the more iconic ones for Spidey, because it's very easy to just take the existing suit and make it black. They kind of brought about the classic white symbol, kind of returning, but also making it much more sinister, much more malevolent, keen to the way that that the symbiote definitely makes things much more aggressive, and therefore represents the symbol very well done here at the front and on the back. And one of those cool things that they did is to make the symbol both on the front and on the back, because it kind of loops around and attaches itself on the sides here, is pretty much embossing it on the top of the surface, so you can actually feel the plastic kind of protrusion or so, or just like the raising of the symbol in and of itself, especially around the leg area and on the front and on even a little the top part of the obliques and the abdominal pieces. Here on the, it's actually pretty astounding that they three-dimensionalized this instead of just being a paint tap. It's fully realized, and you can feel it on both the front and on the back. And that's also another approach that not only Insomniac tackled with their variation of the black suit, but Marvel Legends was able to match it pretty much one-to-one, which have to be all of these different like panel segmentations to mimic that of the tracksuit approach to the Advanced Suit 2.0 that he's got going on in the game. And you see that being fully realized around the shoulder area, the arm area, the legs, and still kind of keeping in line with the paneling that's happening right here, especially the little line segmentation. So you can find an awful lot here on the abdomen, especially with the one that's kind of arching here towards the top. But what's even cooler and even faithful and awesome for them to have tackled this approach is for Marvel Legends to not only keep those panels and those linings still intact, one-to-one to the way that the suit looked like in the game, but also still retaining the alien synthetic symbiotic goo that you have things kind of attaching those panels within each other, it kind of making it seem a little animated, just like it was in the game. Whenever you kind of stood still with the black suit, you'll notice little portions of the suit still kind of writhing and looking kind of slimy, but also animated to make it very abundantly clear that the suit was still alive. And it was a pretty really cool and neat, but also kind of creepy looking visual. So they tried to replicate that, albeit pretty nicely here in Marvel Legends format, by having certain segments of the outer part of the thighs, a little bit around the inside part of the arms and the biceps, kind of emulating a little bit of that symbiotic goo nature to the texture, having it be kind of, like I said, very stringy, very kind of stretched and torn apart here, and being able to sculpt all of those little details for the texture onto the body itself and graft it in was really well done as far as their approaches and their practices. save for the feet. I'm sorry, but despite getting a few of the linings of the shoes here down right to kind of mimic that of the original Advanced Suit 2.0 style, the actual design and overall sizing of the feet is just massive. I get that you guys are trying to compliment my boy Peter here. After all, the Symbiote suit is designed to amplify every part of the host that it's attaching itself to. So kudos for the symbiote looking out for our mans here, but at the same time, in Marvel Legends format, the feet do look egregiously too massive. Now, granted, there is a bit of a silver lining to this, is that it definitely helps in keeping the guy very, very stabilized, but at the same time, from a visual standpoint, yeah, it's very difficult to ignore the massive things down there at the bottom. You know, one of these things right here that would make Oscar Proud from the Proud family go crazy, just like when he saw the Cienega. And a similar and somewhat inevitable complaint could also be said about the only paint applications that could be done onto a suit here, because you pretty much have a pretty easy job to work with here, Hasbro, as far as paint applications, because he's predominantly just a black suit, and you're only going to be dealing with a little handful of white applications, predominantly the symbols here on the front and on the back, the white kind of arrows here on the top of the fists right here, which overall are probably the two that make it out of here completely unscathed as far as the practices and the paint applications and what they actually did to them here. But looking a little closer towards the legs, you'll notice that you do have a couple of QC problems with the misalignment of the spray on of the white applications right there. I know we're past the point of no return when it comes to Marvel Legends. This is just going to be a little bit of an expected hindrance that you're really going to have to hunt down a form of a prototype with Marvel Legends to figure out exactly if you're going to get one that's completely down to the exact millimeter of paint applications done right. And unfortunately, that's also done just a little bit for the white lenses, which overall the head sculpt is done pretty nicely. It's your pretty standard Spidey head sculpt, but naturally they were able to replicate the semi-matted texture to the front part of the dome, while at the same time retaining a little bit of that alien goo aesthetic to the back of the cerebral cortex, so to speak. I always liked that little detail that Insomniac was able to bake into their design of the symbiote suit in their game, because naturally when the symbiote takes over, it's gonna have a very huge impact on the brain. So I like that overall throughout the helmet. It's really the back here where you have that part of your brain that kind of controls your thoughts and kind of connects the brain to the spine, that the symbiote is most present. And I like that the Marvel Legends was able to replicate that right here. But the left lens also has a very, very subtle but still yet apparent black little separation right there on the underside. You could barely kind of make it out. From a distance, I almost kind of missed it, to be quite honest, but once I got a little up close when shooting some of the B-roll, I did notice that there's a little bit of a QC problem underlying right there. So double check your figures to make sure that everything is still intact right there as far as the paint applications, because even when you have the most bare minimum with a black suit, one of the easier jobs to do for Marvel Legends to get right in the QC department, there's still going to be, well, the grass is always going to be greener in that sense. Now, whether or not you vibe with the body and the tooling that they utilize for that incarnation is going to remain pretty subjective and contested, because here is where I think we got an awful lot of people coming to the forefront saying that this guy was incredibly underwhelming. I don't necessarily feel that way, but I also can't necessarily blame them when it comes to the articulation aspect of the tooling, because when you get to the head, it's on a form of a dumbbell ball joint there at the top that allows the head to fully rotate the full 360. However, when it comes to tilting up and down, it's not bad necessarily, but you can definitely feel the absence of the hinge, allowing further extension towards the front and towards the back like it traditionally does. Furthermore, tilting side to side is, again, pretty decent, but it's definitely much more favorable than the hinge, because the hinge is coming into conflict because of how vertical slice it really ends up being. Once we get to the arms, though, is where I heard the most outcry regarding this figure, because you do have the joint there that allows a full rotation 360 degrees, as well as the hinge inside of the shoulder that allows extension up until that point at a flat 180 degrees right about right there. But unfortunately, no butterflies of any kind. It's designed with this kind of cupping mechanism right here with the way that this is all assembled, that this is pretty much it. You just extend off to that degree right there, rotate it all the way around, and it feels pretty tight and firm, pretty well assembled as far as the plastic popping in there. But a huge shame to see that nothing is happening here as far as butterflies, shrugging, or anything to kind of move it in any other direction. And, you know, if this was any other character, in fact, another character that was still included in this wave, I would be able to bypass it somewhat, but knowing that this is Spidey out of all characters, and this is very much one missed opportunity that I full-heartedly agree with. After that, though, we get to our usual routine. We have the biceps that are fully able to rotate the full 360, two elbow joints, pinless as well, that are able to fully bend almost all the, actually practically all the way up, no problems there. Though I will admit that maybe we could have used a little bit of extra mass. As much as it would have conflicted with the joints, I would have added a little bit of extra mass to amplify, like I said, the physique that Peter's got going on, considering the actual attributes of the suit, but I digress. And then, similar to that of the shoulder, we have a wrist joint that fully allows the hand to rotate 360 degrees, but of course it's cup design, so no form of ball joints. The hinge instead is baked into the hand that allows the full bending downwards and upwards of the hand right there. As far as that, it does kind of feel a little limited when bending inwards, again because of the design of the cuff right here, so do be careful with that when minding that. But on the bright side, I finally realized that this joint right here, the guys over at Marvel, they keep calling it the rocker. So at least Spidey, despite not having butterflies, he's got a rocker for the mid-torso that fully allows it to rotate 360 degrees in a form of a semi-ratcheted position right there. You can kind of feel slight clicks, but it never feels like it's breaking or having any kind of friction on the inside. Feels pretty good in hand and pretty, almost damn near premium. Now, crunching inwards is unfortunately a little limited. In fact, it barely nudges downwards. It comes into conflict with this overall abdominal piece. But extending towards the back, the rocker allows a little bit of extra slack, so you can kind of see that though it creates a form of a gap right there at the top, it does extend towards the back right about right there, that far. And if you want further extension, you have the upside down hinge at the waist that is able to click a little more towards the back like so, about that far in distance. And then the crunching on the abdominals can be much better realized via that hinge upwards like so, almost at like a full seated position. Top leg joints can bend up and a little past the hip slightly when you kind of veer it at an angle right about right there. Extension towards the back, however, cannot be fully realized, only slightly a nudge that far, only because of the ass sculpt. And then extension towards the sides is kind of similar to some other Marvel Legends I've been tackling recently, where it kind of stops just shy of the 180 degree because of the way that this whole crotch area is tooled together right there. And that could be a form of a deal breaker for some folks. Just keep that in mind. You do have thigh swivels, though, that are fully able to rotate there just on the underside of the top leg joints. So I do wish that we can at least get a little closer to the point where Marvel Legends will take the thigh swivels and at least put them mid-thigh to constitute as thigh swivels and not as top leg swivels, because they're starting to feel like that. But right underneath that, though, you have more pinless knee joints that are fully able to bend all the way up and feel pretty nice in hand, almost semi-ratcheted, so they feel kind of premium, to be quite honest. Right underneath that, though, pretty surprising to me, because I gotta be honest, considering he's in an all-black suit, I almost missed this. He technically does have a shin/boot swivel just underneath the knee, similar to that of the thigh swivel, so he is fully able to rotate the lower part of the leg 360 degrees on that cut. And underneath that, you do have, of course, have that traditional Marvel Legends ankle joint that has the hinge that allows the foot to bend upwards and downwards in those degrees, as well as slightly pivot and incline inwards and outwards. No full rotation 360, but of course realizing that you have the shin swivel will compensate for that. So good amount of articulation, a little bit on the rigidity side when it comes to, like I said, these cuts and these vertical slices and things like that, especially when it comes to the rigidness of the top arms, top legs, and a few of those thigh swivels. I like the amount of swivels that there are, but the actual flexing as well as the upside down hinge joint, that's where like I said, I personally don't see any problems for me subjectively, for me directly, but I don't necessarily blame anyone for looking at the articulation, looking at the flexibility that out of all characters Symbiote Spidey was given, and think to themselves, yeah, there's an awful lot of cut corners and unrealized potential here. I don't necessarily blame them. Like it's not lost on me that this could be a make or break for some collectors out there. And if that wasn't the deal breaker, maybe the accessories will be it, though I was also pleasantly surprised considering the price point, because thankfully this guy is not being, it's part of the gamerverse. So I don't know if there was some kind of arrangement with Sony where they were like, you know what, keep this thing at $25. So at $25, you do get the figure, and you get a good assortment of hand accessories. They didn't really skimp out this time around, because by default, he's got the fisted hands on his person, and then naturally, you're going to have the traditional usual suspects when it comes to the hand accessories. You're going to have the extended wall crawling pair that you got going on right there, similarly decked out in black with the white arrows on the top, and then similarly, you're going to have, of course, the web shooting hands. So nothing new in terms of like gestures or expressions or sculptings of any kind. Of course, what are you going to expect, since this is pretty much a freebie for Hasbro. But on the bright side, the actual allocation of what they decided to include, you got 2, 4, 6 hands total. At least they weren't, skimping out. They didn't do any kind of asymmetrical bullshit. And even the web accessory that he's got included here was able to barely, and I mean barely, pass, because if you look a little closer, you'll note that yes, especially at this end right here with this completely familiar loop that he's got going on this end, yes, this is that traditional goddamn web strand that they would always throw in with an awful lot of their Marvel Legends, specifically around the MCU time. They would throw in that same strand over and over and over. But just like the body in and of itself, they did something a little bit different. Not only did they elongate it ever so slightly, but they coated it in this black, paint layer that you can kind of feel and tell. They took an existing web strand that was like a clear plastic and applied the paint right on top of it to give it this extra semi-matted finish that feels pretty good in hand. It feels a little, I don't want to say premium, because I can tell that it's mostly that extra layer of paint that's doing the heavy lifting, but it definitely doesn't feel as flimsy or as easily stretchable, or for lack of a better term, cheap, as some of those other web strands that they would throw in with their MCU Spidey figures. Some of which they even still throw in to this day. And then on top of that, they added some extra little tendrils to kind of invoke that symbiote feeling of the web strand in and of itself. But make no mistake, this is already a pre-existing web strand accessory they've done in the past. Like I said before, look no further than the little loop you have on this end, and even a little bit of this hook piece that you have on this other end. But at least looking at what they did here in the middle with these extra little arms and pieces that they sculpted and attached to the middle parts of the web strand, as well as the paint application, the black paint application, I would argue that at least I want them to continue doing something like this, where they can take something that we are on the cusp of getting tired of and change it up a bit. Again, your competitor, McFarlane, yes, they repaint, reuse, but at least they kind of Frankenstein things in a way where at least it feels like it kind of creates the illusion that we're getting something new, even though I know in my heart of hearts that we're not truly getting something totally completely new, but it at least pulls the magic trick. And for a little while there, Marvel Legends was just pulling tricks and no magic. So it's good to see that there's a baby step in that sort of direction with a web strand like this. But at the end of the day, I know that it's just a web strand. If anything, if I were to pull out an extra accessory I would have liked to have been included with Symbiote Spidey here at the end of the day, it would probably be an extra head sculpt that shows a little bit of that aggressive expression that he was starting to take on towards the latter half of his symbiote arc. If you have played the game, or hell, if you even watched the trailer where he tells Miles that, "So am I," when talking about Lizard being dangerous, you can kind of make out that his lenses were starting to get a little jagged, and I would have liked if maybe an extra head sculpt with those jagged lined lenses would have been awesome to sweeten up the deal. But at the same time, he didn't really come with much of anything else. The only thing really left to do here would be to bring in the OG Advanced Suit 2.0 from 2023, the one that they for sure needed to get out of the way to promote heavily the upcoming release of Spider-Man 2, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. And yes, you can definitely see the juxtaposition, the irony that we're dealt with right here, where you arguably do have the better chosen body sculpt for the Advanced Suit 2.0 that probably should have gone to that of the symbiote suit, considering that he's much bulkier, much huskier, better articulation with clear indicative butterfly joints there. But at least the symbiote suit has the very faithful texture applications, the paint applications and the sculpting of that symbiote, despite a few of the misalignment with the QCs in mass production. And again, that really clean, very simplistic approach to the alien goo that he's got strung out throughout the suit. Apart from that, though, at least we got some included hand accessories, a little bit more than even that of this guy, because this guy technically only came with 4, the 2 fists, and then the asymmetrical stretched out and web. At least this guy is able to give you the full assortment. And even though he's got more, you know what? The more I gotta go out about it, yes, I'm still happy with the inclusion of Spider-Man 2 black suited symbiote here. Better late than never. But looking back at this guy, despite having the completely bad shade of blue on him, at least he was able to deliver a little bit more on the objectivity that you look for in a Marvel Legends Spidey, even one tied to an existing IP like Spider-Man 2. So good to see that we finally have these two sides of the coin from that sequel finally realized in 7-inch format. But yeah, even here on camera, you can deduce a little bit of that height difference. And I'm trying to split Advanced Suit 2.0's legs to at least kind of shorten him a little bit. And even then, oh my God, am I going through an intervention here? Am I finally seeing the light? Am I having post-nut clarity in Marvel Legends form?
Pause.
Son of a bitch. Here, I literally came into this review defending this guy, and then finally, upon pulling this guy out of the box and standing him right next to Symbiote Suit Spidey, God damn it. It's like the Return to Arkham 2-pack that has what is alleged to be a remastered version of Arkham Asylum, but then when I go back and play Arkham Asylum on PC and have the full 60 FPS, 4K resolution, I'm thinking to myself, the remaster didn't do jack shit. And now I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, there's some really good things about Symbiote Suit Spidey, but there's definitely an awful lot of balls being dropped here with this current release that I think to myself and go, there's still a great amount of wasted opportunity. As the review went on, I'm thinking to myself, this guy's an 8 out of 10. He's a pretty solid release. And then the more I futz with the articulation, thought to myself, okay, fine, 7 out of 10. Could have benefited from an extra head sculpt, but at least we got the hand accessories, the web strand, and then bringing this guy about. I'm like, God damn, what am I doing with my life? This is one of the more transformative reviews that I've ever done. And here's the thing, I'm gonna leave it as is. This has been a very enthralling experience, and one that will hopefully, serve as a form of cautionary tale. Don't be afraid to pull out some existing figures and know exactly what you had and what was once lost, because as this review went on, yeah, we stumbled and crawled through the dirt, finally to arise and see the sun, and realize that this is a high and ambitious yet still wasted of an opportunity 6 out of 10. Oh man, I can't believe this is happening to me on camera. But you know what? I feel like if it can happen to me, it can happen to other collectors, and hopefully this video will at least serve as a form of diary entry, journal entry into the life of a collector, to know and to hopefully remind others that you are not alone when having existential collector moments like this. I'm gonna go and stare at myself in the mirror just like Spidey did in that image from Spider-Man 3 that never ended up making it into the final cut of the film. But while I do that, please let me know, guys, did you get your Symbiote Suit Spidey from Spider-Man 2 Marvel Legends in? Are you guys happy with it? Or did you go through the journey in full tumbler of emotions like I just did right now when finally pairing him up against the original Advanced Suit 2.0 with some of your pre-existing Spider-Man Marvel Legends figures, some of which even come from the Gamerverse back in 2020, 2021, etc. Please let me know your guys' experiences down below. While you guys are down there, hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this review, because trust me, I think it's one of the experiences of all time that I had on camera. And if you didn't, however, hit the thumbs down nonetheless. And as always, I appreciate you for watching. And remember, stay humble and stay cognitive. Otherwise, you end up with moments like this.